The story of the 10 plagues of Egypt is one of the most dramatic and pivotal narratives in the Bible, recorded in the book of Exodus, chapters 7 through 12. It recounts the confrontation between God, through Moses, and Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and the suffering that befell the Egyptian people. The narrative raises profound questions about justice, divine power, and human responsibility. Were the plagues purely a judgment, or were they also a warning meant to bring repentance? The story begins with the Israelites living in Egypt under oppressive conditions. Pharaoh, fearing the growing population and potential rebellion of the Hebrews, had subjected them to harsh labor. God calls Moses at the burning bush to deliver his people from slavery. God instructs Moses to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites, warning him that refusal would bring a series of escalating plagues. The first plague is the turning of the Nile River into blood. Moses, following God's command, strikes the waters with his staff, and the river becomes undrinkable. Fish die, and the water smells foul. This initial plague demonstrates divine authority over nature and challenges the Egyptian worship of the Nile as a god. Despite the devastation, Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he refuses to release the Israelites. The second plague brings frogs over the land. Frogs emerge from the river and invade homes, bedrooms, and kitchens, creating discomfort and chaos. Pharaoh temporarily relents, asking Moses to intercede, but once the frogs are gone, he hardens his heart again, refusing to release the Israelites. This pattern of temporary repentance, followed by obstinacy, repeats throughout the narrative, emphasizing human stubbornness in the face of divine warning. The third plague turns dust into gnats or lice, affecting people and animals alike. This is followed by the fourth plague, a swarm of flies, which invades homes and disrupts daily life. The plagues increase in severity and variety, targeting multiple aspects of Egyptian society, including personal comfort, hygiene, and health. Each demonstrates God's control over both the natural and human-constructed world. The fifth and sixth plagues escalate to direct attacks on livestock and health. The fifth plague kills Egyptian livestock, but the Israelites' animals are spared. The sixth brings painful boils on humans and animals alike. These plagues highlight both divine justice and mercy, punishing the Egyptians while preserving the Israelites, reinforcing the covenantal relationship between God and his people. The seventh plague is a destructive hailstorm, which ruins crops, kills humans and animals caught outdoors, and shatters property. The eighth brings locusts, consuming what remains of the vegetation. The ninth plague plunges the land into 3 days of darkness, a profound psychological and spiritual attack, demonstrating that even the sun, a central element of Egyptian religion, is subject to God's power. Finally, the 10th plague is the most devastating, the death of the firstborn. God instructs the Israelites to mark their doorposts with the blood of a lamb, a sign that the angel of death will pass over their homes. In Egypt, the firstborn of every household, from the royal family to commoners, die. Pharaoh, stricken with grief and fear, finally releases the Israelites. This act fulfills God's warning and demonstrates both the severity of divine justice and the consequences of hardened hearts. The plagues function on multiple levels. On one hand, they are judgments against Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt. Each plague undermines specific deities worshipped by the Egyptians: the Nile, frogs, livestock, the sun demonstrating God's supremacy over all creation. On the other hand, the plagues are a warning designed to elicit repentance. Pharaoh is given multiple opportunities to release the Israelites, but his repeated refusal shows the limits of human free will when pride and fear dominate. From a historical perspective, scholars debate the literal nature of the plagues. Some suggest natural explanations, such as Nile pollution, frog overpopulation, or locust swarms, possibly amplified in a cascading ecological crisis. Others emphasize the theological purpose of the narrative over scientific details, highlighting the story as a theological truth rather than a historical record. Whether literal or symbolic, the narrative powerfully conveys themes of divine justice, mercy, and the consequences of moral obstinacy. Theologically, the plagues serve to reveal God's character. They demonstrate his control over nature, history, and human rulers. They differentiate between the people of Israel, who are under God's protection, and the Egyptians, who experience judgment due to Pharaoh's defiance. The story also sets the stage for the Exodus, which becomes a foundational event for Israelite identity, law, and worship. The final plague, in particular, introduces the practice of the Passover, commemorating God's deliverance and reinforcing the covenant relationship. My personal reflection on the plagues is that they illustrate the complex balance between warning and judgment. The narrative is not simply about punishment. It is about consequences for choices and the opportunity to respond to divine guidance. Pharaoh's hardened heart is a cautionary example. Power, arrogance, and refusal to heed warnings can lead to devastation not only for leaders but for those they govern. At the same time, the preservation of the Israelites shows that obedience, faith, and moral alignment with God bring protection and deliverance. The plagues are terrifying, not merely because of their physical effects, but because they reveal the profound moral and spiritual realities at play. Every action has consequences, and ignoring truth can lead to unavoidable judgment. For me, the story remains a timeless reminder that warnings are often given long before calamity strikes, and the measure of wisdom is how one responds to them.